Okay, I'm going to pick up, we started kind of basically with this last time. I talked about Blackboard, how we're going to use that, the syllabus, assignments, and the realm projects. Now I want to give you a little film clip. Why should we learn geography? I think I have to make that point. Why is this important? So I happen to find this. Carmina Burana, right, Ellen? Right. This is an embedded YouTube.
What countries make up Great Britain? You've heard of Great Britain?
Yeah.
If someone says they're going to Great Britain, what language do they speak when they get there?
British?
They speak British. Okay. Have you ever met anyone who speaks British?
No.
You think of any word in British?
No.
No, Minnie Cooper.
Oh yeah, Minnie Cooper.
That's a good. We're talking with.
What?
If you met someone from Amsterdam, what nationality would they be?
I have no idea. Amsterdamian.
Amsterdamian. No, they wear wooden shoes. Who wears wooden shoes?
Cobblers.
Cobblers? So they'd be cobblers. All right. We're talking with
Lindsay Shanks.
Lindsay, you're a high school student as well.
Yes, sir.
What is the world's tallest mountain?
It's not Mount Rushmore.
Do you ever rest?
Do I what?
Ever rest?
Oh. I really don't know.
See, I asked you, do you ever rest? And you said,
Oh, Mount Everest.
Everest. There you go. Talking with
I sat at a bar.
I shut. What do you name? And you're a high school student?
Yes, sir.
What are people from Denmark called? You meet a bunch of people from Denmark.
I don't know. Denmardians?
Denmardians.
I don't know.
Denmardians. What are Great Lakes out there?
Oh, a lot. Like 500 something?
100.
No, I could be wrong.
Can you name all 100?
No. I could be really wrong.
Can you name one Great Lake?
Big great.
Big Lake. We're talking with
Nick.
Nick. What do you do?
I go to high school,
Go to high school.
in Roy City, Texas.
And what do you want to do when you get out?
I would like to be a film director.
Film director. Okay. You've heard of the English Channel.
Yes.
Goes between what two countries?
France and England.
England. Now, is there any way to get there besides by boat?
I think there's like a bridge, like a really long bridge, and it goes under the water.
So a bridge that goes under the water would be called what?
An underwater bridge. Oh, yeah.
We're talking with
Caitlin Wilcox.
Caitlin. You're from where?
Arkansas.
Arkansas. Okay. How's the school system in Arkansas?
It's awesome.
It's good.
Mhm.
Let's see
It's
how.
really good.
Let's see how good it is. How many oceans are there?
Oceans?
Yeah.
I've only been to one.
You've been to one.
I've been to one.
Which one were you at?
Florida.
Which one?
An ocean.
Which ocean did you go to?
Pacific
You
Ocean.
went to the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Florida. How was it?
It's good.
It's good. Yeah. What is the largest country in South America?
In South America, Africa?
And where is Africa?
I don't know. Like South Europe or something?
South
I don't
Europe.
know.
Iraq is in South. So you go to Europe and go south.
I don't know.
What country would you find the Panama Canal in?
Panama Canal. Is there a country named Panama? No. No. Oh, is it in the U.S.? No.
Why do they call it the Panama Canal again?
Is there a guy named Panama? Maybe the
What? You made the
canal, the
Canal.
Panama Canal.
If you're going down to use the Panama Canal, you're trying to get from where to where?
one place to another. It's faster.
Faster than, yeah, but from where does it go?
Oh, Panama and France.
Panama and France. Where is Iraq? You know, we hear so much about Iraq.
Iraq?
Yeah.
Iraq is in Afghanistan.
We're talking with,
Mackenzie Maxwell
where's the Berlin Wall located?
in the former Soviet Union.
No.
Oh, darn.
Is the Berlin Wall still there?
No.
What happened?
Well, David Hasselhoff says him.
And what did David Hasselhoff have to do with it?
I saw it on E, and he said that he should be in the memorial for the permanent.
That's why.
Don't know.
You met some people in Denmark. What would they be called?
Denmark.
A group of people in Denmark would be called
Jewish people.
Jewish. Where is the Outback?
The Outback. The restaurant.
The restaurant.
I don't know.
No, no, sure. Okay.
Okay. My goal in this class is to put you in a situation where if Jay Leno's ever interviewing on the street, that you won't embarrass yourself like that. Now, you can ask anyone a question, and that's obviously we don't know everything. And I believe in the statement of my former Oklahoman, Will Rogers. Will Rogers said, "Everybody is ignorant, only on different subjects." So, and ignorance doesn't mean you're stupid. Ignorance simply means you don't know. So one of the things we're going to do in this class is I'm going to help you become more familiar with geography, what it means, what it does, so that if someone asks you, Panama Canal, what does it connect? You will not say it's in France or it connects something in the United States. And you also should know that the Panama Canal is not even owned by the United States anymore. It's owned by Panama, which is another thing. And the Panama Canal is located in what realm? The Middle American realm. No, not South America. Panama is in Middle America. South America is the continent. See, those are the little things about geography we're going to learn. Obviously, we talk about geography. Let's look at a definition. I said geography is the study of the earth, which is what geography as the word means, or to write about the earth. It studies place and space, where things are in relationship to space, okay? So you're going to hear geographers always referring to spatial, S-P-A-T-I-A-L, spatial. It's a form of spatial intelligence. Some of us are really good with maps. How many of you say you are really good at reading a map? How many of you say you're not? How about knowing which direction things are? All right, for instance, in this room, which direction are you facing? East. South. Okay, now we obviously don't have anything in the sky to help us with that. We are facing south. You're facing east. Where is east then? If this is south, you're facing south. Where's east? Right. Where's north? All right. Now, there are people out there that don't have a very good concept of spatial intelligence. My mother-in-law, if I walked her out in the broad daylight and I say, which direction are you facing? She wouldn't be able to. She said, I have no concept of. And you give her a map, she can't read it. She gets lost all the time. And she's a very bright woman, but she just doesn't have a good spatial form. Someone says, okay, go to 13th and Van Doren in Lincoln. Now, I don't have a map in my head, but I have a pretty good idea where that is. And I can eventually get there without maybe necessarily going on the right street, like maybe a north-south street, but I can eventually figure that out. So spatial intelligence is a key part to geography. Now, another thing about geography is you look at the concept of location. What is location? Where is something located? All right? So there are two ways to talk about location in geography. The absolute location of something, that is, its latitude and longitude, and you probably learned that in school. Latitude comes first, longitude comes second. Latitude is a line that's going around the Earth this way. Longitude's going, I look at long, longitude, latitude. The equator is an example of a line of latitude, and the prime meridian is an example of a line of longitude. If I give you latitude and longitude, you can locate something on a map. And it's very, very important. And you can break that down into degrees and minutes, and sailors use this all the time. Another type of location is relative location. So if I would say, where is Minnesota? And you don't know the absolute location, what would be a relative location to tell us where Minnesota is?
North.
North. Okay. What else? Near Canada. All right. So it's south of Canada or north of Canada? South of Canada. All right. More information. Where is Minnesota? It's in the north. It's south of Canada. It's
Next to the Great Lakes.
Next to the Great Lakes, and then I could say which Great Lake. All right, but see, that's the point of a relative location. It's relative to something else. Where's Nebraska's location? Well, you could say it's north of Kansas, it's west of Iowa, it's east of Wyoming, and south of South Dakota. Right? Where's Crete? Have you been asked that? I was in Denver recently on our band trip, and someone said, "Where's Crete?" And we're going, "Oh, this is going to be." Crete is south of Lincoln. We're hoping they understand where Lincoln is. And then we'll say, what do you mean south of Lincoln? Okay, it's about 30 miles southwest of Lincoln. And if you really want to help them, say, well, get on I-77. It's south of I-80. I mean, then you can give all kinds of other. It's right next to the Blue River. How about that? That really helps. But then someone like Sydney said, well, hold it. Seward's next to that doesn't help me. I'll get it back home, but I won't get to Crete. So location is a very key part of geography. So one of the key questions, one of the first questions of geography is where? And remember, I have two other central questions that we'll address. Where, why there, why is it there, and why do we care? So what? Who cares? And so I hope to answer all three. Obviously, with geography, we look at human activity on the globe, what goes on. Obviously, the human activity in Nebraska is different than the human activity in Mississippi. That has to do with climate, weather, agriculture, access to water, all kind of, when the state was founded. There's a historical difference between someone from the South and someone from Nebraska. I mean, I've noticed that being from Oklahoma. I have Oklahoma completely entrenched in my mind, and when I moved to Nebraska, I had to relearn things. Where are things located? What's the most important places to go? Things of that sort. So geography deals with that. It also deals with natural environment, rivers and lakes and mountains and plateaus and plains and all of those things. So where, why there, why do we care are the three questions I hope to be able to answer as we look at all these different realms and regions of the realm. And then my best example for that is Crete. And so let's take a look at Crete, and I'm going to ask these three questions. Where is it? Why is it there? And I think my text is wrong. It should be where, why there, why do we care? And to help with this, I'm going to pull up my Google Earth. All right, so here's Google Earth. You can download this on your machine for free, and it will automatically come up to North America. So I'm going to go up here and type Crete. Now, if I just did Crete, this could possibly happen. Oops. Now, wouldn't that be nice? There's Crete. Now, how would you like to say, well, Doan is in Crete. It's on an island in the Mediterranean. Well, no, it's not. So let's not do that. But how many people, when you said you're from Crete, look at you like, oh, you mean an island in the Mediterranean? I bet you a lot of people don't even know that. So we're going to go to Crete, Nebraska. All right? And so Google Earth is now going to move. Isn't that cool? What a neat program. And it's going to go over the United States, it's going to go over Nebraska, and then there we have Crete. That's a really cool map. Now, this is a Google map. Have you seen the little Google operation driving around taking pictures? Yeah, I don't know when this was actually a satellite taken. It may have been taken in the 2000s. sometimes the picture's not very up to date, but if you look down here, it will give you the date. Oh, 6/10/2014 is the last satellite view of Crete. Here is the latitude and longitude. So if you want to know the exact latitude and longitude for location, it's 40 degrees, 38 minutes, 31 seconds north latitude, and 97 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 degrees, 29 seconds west longitude. It's at an elevation of 1,448. So we are above sea level. And if we drove to Denver, we would go uphill, right? So we were so happy when we were driving back from Denver, it was all downhill. And I kept telling the bus driver, just go downhill and we'll get home. All right, now we look at our map, and now I'm going to ask you, where is Crete? And then the question is, okay, we know where it is from absolute. We've already talked about relative location, so we got the where question answered. The next question is, why is it there? Okay, so here's Crete. Why is Crete here? Who are my Cretians in here? Okay, we have a Cretan. Nina, why is Crete here?
It's located near water.
Okay, and located near water, and what water is that?
The river.
The river. You see the river here? And what is that river called? The Blue, but it's actually brown. So your assignment this weekend is to cross the Blue River and tell me if it's really blue. And if you find blue water, please tell me. You know at one time you could actually run a boat down the Blue River? For those of us that have learned Creek history, elementary school or whatever, at one time that river was high enough that you could run a boat all the way down the Blue River. There was a dam in North Crete that allowed to control the water on the Blue, and they blew up the dam many, many years ago because there were some flooding issues because of the Blue, and that dam was causing the problem. There used to be a big lake up at Tuxedo Park, and that lake is in that area where they have kind of the drag racing trip, a dirt track. That used to be a lake that was associated with the river, and all of that was changed, and I've always wanted to see, well, there are some old pictures of Crete where you can see that, and it's just truly remarkable. You can actually go from Tuxedo Park and take a boat and go all the way down to Beatrice. You know, take a scenic tour down the Blue. Wouldn't that be fun? Now, you'd probably die because it's polluted. So don't take a boat ride of the Blue River, and definitely don't get out and walk around in it because there's all kinds of garbage in that. All right, so Blue River is very important for location. Anything else significant? Why is Crete here? Railroad. Okay, do you see the railroad? Okay, so why is the railroad here? Why do we need a railroad in Crete?
Import and export.
Import and export what?
Crops.
Crops. What crops are grown in Crete?
Soy.
Soy, wheat, corn. Okay, that's three good examples. There probably other things grown there too. Marijuana. No. I don't know that. All right, so we had those crops. And who were the first people living in the Crete area along the Blue?
Yes.
Native Americans. Okay, Native Americans living on the Crete. They were primarily hunters. They were living in teepees as opposed to other Indian tribes in the United States, Native Americans that lived in wigwams or huts or whatever. This is the cultural thing of the Plains Indian tribes. Cheyenne, Sioux, Pawnee kind of drifted between the two. But anyway, you have Native Americans living along the Blue River, probably in teepees, and at one time, if we were standing on the Hill of Dome, we could have looked down the hill and seen the Blue River, and natives living near the river and their animals drinking out of the river and not dying from poison. That would have been the reality, and that would have been in the 1870s, later 1860s. All right, then all of a sudden Nebraska has white people crossing through the state. Why were they crossing through Nebraska? To get somewhere else. You're right. The flyover state. No, why were they going through Nebraska? History. Oregon Trail, all right. And if you were a Mormon, you were not allowed to go with the other folks, so you went on the north side of the Platte River, and you crossed that way. If you were on the Oregon Trail and you were not a Mormon, you went on the south. And so that Oregon Trail actually crosses through this area. If you go to Denton, you can actually see the ruts of the Oregon Trail. Anybody do that as a kid? Actually, Larry Starr and I, Sydney's grandpa, I did a sabbatical with Larry when he was teaching 8th grade at Crete High School. And Larry is an excellent carpenter as well. He made Mormon carts from the original design, and then we took our 8th graders and we went out to Denton to Spring Lake, and have you been to Spring Lake? It's an environmental area. It's great for grasslands and water. There's springs there. Anyway, we actually walked through the ruts that were still in the ground from way long time ago. That was called the Nebraska City Cutoff for the Oregon Trail. Really cool that we can actually see those ruts still there. So this area was actually founded by some whites that were crossing through the area to get to eventually to the Pacific Ocean or to Utah, in that case for the Mormons. So that's how we came there. They came here and they saw the Blue River, and so they got a drink. And then some of them decided to hang around. And then, of course, we have Abraham Lincoln in 1860s had the Homestead Act, right? And so all the homesteading was going on. The first guy that lived in Crete was a man by the name of Jesse Bickle, and his house is still there. If you go across the railroad track, 33 goes off to the left. You keep going on 33 past Christina's. You go over the tracks, look to your right, and you'll see this 2-story house. That's Jesse Bickle's house. He's the first person to live in this town. His wife was from Crete, Illinois. So if you ever wondered where Crete got its name, his wife named the town Crete, Nebraska, because she grew up in Crete, Illinois. The first name of this area was called Blue River City, and that changed later on because Blue River City, I guess Jesse didn't think it was a very good name. And then there was another guy that was very important in developing the city of Crete, and that was the chief engineer of the Burlington, Missouri Railroad, a guy by the name of Thomas Doane. Thomas Doane was hired by the railroad to run a trunk line through this area that started up in Omaha, went down to Plattsmouth, and came over through Crete, and then all the way, and then reconnected with the Union Pacific Railroad that went through Nebraska. That was Thomas Doane's job. Now, he also was a well-educated man from Massachusetts. And so when he got through this area, he noticed at this time, if you would have got off the train at the Crete area, there was nothing here. It was a hill, a beautiful hill, grassy, no trees. No trees in Crete. There may have been a tree or two down by the Blue. No trees. He comes and looks at that hill and said, that'd be a great place to put a school. I wonder if the railroad would give me 600 acres that I could dedicate for this project. He went to the railroad. Most people get 300. The railroad gave him 600, and that became then the foundation of Doane College in 1871. All right? So Jesse Bickle was here around later 1860s, 1870s. Thomas Doane comes in 1871. The railroad's coming through, goes right by Jesse Bickle's house. Just think of that, getting up in the morning and having that railroad whistle blowing. And, of course, what are some of those things you see along the railroad? You see the mill, right? What are they grinding? When I moved to Nebraska in 1992, it smelled like popcorn. And so when I moved into town, the first thing I said to my wife was, there must be a good movie on. I smell the popcorn. And I didn't know what that was because I came from a wheat area, and it doesn't smell like that. We don't grind wheat. And so I go, where does that smell? And I saw the mill, Bungie Mill, and it's right next to the railroad. That makes perfect sense. So if I'm going to harvest my corn, I can put it on the train, and the train now goes back to I-80 and the railroad, and we can now get our grain to market. So the railroad was extremely important, and the river, with Jesse and with Thomas Doane. Those two guys get together, and they basically are the founders of Crete and the founders of Doane. One other person in the story is that Thomas Doane was also very close to a Congregationalist minister. So the first Congregational church in this town was a big part of Thomas Doane's life, and his daughter married the first president of Doane College. So Mr. Perry Campus Center, was a Congregationalist minister, and he married a Doane, Thomas Doane, and Doane College was created. And so this college is a direct result of geography. And it has to do with Native Americans, it has to do with the Blue River, and it has to do with the railroad. So why is Crete here? The river, the railroad, agriculture, natives being here decided this was a nice place to be. Jesse Bickle, Thomas Doane. And now, why is it? When I moved here, about 4,000 people. Now it's about 8,000. The town's grown. The primary foundation of people at this town were primarily not Scotch. They were a Czech German, and you would have been walking down the streets of Crete and they're speaking Czech and German. Now you're walking down the streets, what are they speaking? Spanish. And I find that really interesting because since I know the history of the town, and I've heard some of the older folks talking about, what happened to Great Oak Crete? We have all these people, they don't speak English, they don't speak, and I said, hold it. When this town was founded, they weren't speaking English either, they were speaking German and Czech. So we're just having another area of immigration coming into the area. And now not only do we speak English, we speak German, Vietnamese, Spanish, African languages, you name it, are spoken in Crete because we are a part of the immigration pattern. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so why do we care? Well, why do we care about what I've just said? Because if Crete wasn't here, Doan wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be here, and we can see how the story goes. So that's the point of how I'm trying to make geography related to your real world. Okay, now, another thing about geography is it's considered a social science, but it has elements of the hard sciences. I always thought that rather interesting because a lot of people think of hard science, they think of biology, chemistry, and physics, right? And social sciences would be such things as psychology, sociology, geography, anthropology, and so on. A lot of people think that has to do with how difficult it is. No, it doesn't. It's just an identification. A soft science uses hard science research to be able to figure out the truth. And so that's where that comes from. History is sometimes considered a social science and sometimes considered a humanity. At Doan, it's part of the social science division, which I find interesting. Where I came from, it was a humanities course. History was more associated with art and music than it was with sociology and psychology. But anyway, if you are a scientist, you classify the world, and a biologist, for those of you who are biology majors, you'll notice you'll use the words like taxonomy, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, all right? You've heard of those. If you're a geologist and you study rocks, you have the three major groups of rock, igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. You talk about subsidiary groups, geological time, and so on and so forth. If you're a historian, you break up history in terms of eras and ages and periods of time, centuries, stuff like that. Remember history, as Harry Truman said, history is one damn thing after another. I don't believe that. But some people think that all you do in history is memorize dates, which is like as bad as everything everyone needs to know in geography is only memorize locations of states and capitals. We don't do that either. In geography, we organize our discipline differently. We organize it by realms and regions based on spatial criteria. So you see this word, think of maps. So realms are big areas. Regions are smaller areas within a realm. So here is our map. And again, all this is defined by the geographer that you're using because each geographer can define the world differently if they want. We're talking about this guy's definition of regions and realms. You can find other books that do it differently, so don't let that confuse you. So here is a map showing you the realms of the world. The realms are the big areas and they're outlined in blue. So how many realms are we talking about? Well, you see North America, Middle America is considered a realm. Now you're probably saying, well, why is that? Isn't Middle America the same as South America? Well, no. If you go to Middle America, you're going to find things in Middle America you're not going to find in South America. I know everyone thinks that everyone speaks Spanish in Middle America. Well, there are a lot of Spanish speakers. But you're going to find a lot more diversity in Middle America than you're going to find in South America in terms of language, believe it or not. But we'll talk about that. South America, another realm. Now let's go over to the Eastern Hemisphere. We have Europe, Russia, not the Soviet Union, East Asia, Southeast Asia, South Asia, North Africa, Southwest Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of people are saying, why did you divide Africa up? Well, because North Africa is completely different than sub-Saharan Africa. If you've ever been there, well, you don't have to be there really to know that. The racial composition of North Africa are Caucasian. Basically white. They're brown, but they're white, Caucasian. The racial group of sub-Saharan Africa are black. And they're almost a purple black, which means you put up an African American with an African, and you're going to say, whoa, this guy's black. He's African. I mean, it's a very distinctive racial black. The African Americans in the United States, those that have been here since they're brought over from Africa, have been intermarried and mixed blood for years. So there's probably not a lot of pure-blooded African Americans anymore. So you'll see their skins are very shaded in different lighter shades. So you can see African Americans walking around that look very white. Barack Obama is not a pure African. I mean, he's a part white, part, he's a mulatto, which was the appropriate name for that. Okay, and then we have the Austral realm, and then we have the Pacific realm. So there are the 12 realms. And you can see the lines surrounding them designate when the realms begin. Now, to study these realms more specifically, our geographer has divided the realms into regions. So you can take a look at North America and break it down into regions. And I have another map to kind of demonstrate that. Well, let me go back here a second. Obviously, we're talking about realms. We're talking about the natural physical characteristics, and we're talking about the human cultural figures. All right, we got to that. In geography, we're looking at the interaction between humans and the environment. That's a big part of that. And over time, the world as designed, as populated, has changed. If I had a map of what the world looked like in 1491, it would be quite different than what we see today because it had a limited amount of knowledge of what was out there. Christopher Columbus had no idea that there were two continents out there when he took his boat west. He did know the world was round. Most people did. So that's one of those things that you learned in school that's not quite accurate. He did know the world was round. Most people did at that time. But they just were not sure and very scared about that. And then everyone says, well, why did Columbus go west anyway? Why didn't he go east to get to the Spice Islands? Well, there's a reason for that. Anybody know? Why didn't Columbus, instead of taking a boat ride, take 3 boats and go west looking for the Spice Islands? Why didn't he just go east like everybody had done before to go down to the Spice Islands to get salt and pepper and whatever he needed to make his food and his tacos taste better in Spain? Why did he go east? Why not east?
He thought it'd be shorter going in.
He thought it would be shorter, right? But there was actually a better reason than that. There were a group of people that was in control of the major routes going east. Excuse me? Pirates? Yes, around the Mediterranean. That would be exactly, they would be pirates. Believe it or not, excuse me, some of them were Spanish, but they have to do with a religious affiliation. They were Muslim. That's the time period when the Muslim empire was very strong and they were controlling all of the trade routes going to the east. What religion was Columbus? Catholic. He was Italian. All right? So Catholics and Muslims don't do very well. Remember the Crusades? All right, so the Muslims controlled that area. So Columbus said, if I go east, I'm going to run into those guys, and I'll get my head cut off. I'm a bad guy. So he said, I'm going to go to the Spanish queen and see if she'll give me some boats, and I'm going to try my other direction. And that's why he did it. So it's kind of interesting that history was defined by religion. Another example of knowing geography as well. Now, another thing that you're going to notice about the realms and the regions of the realm is that when you see these blue lines that separate one realm from another, I don't want you to think that it's something that you're going to see if you go out and look and see a blue line in the ground. It is an area, so there's kind of what we call a transition zone. So if you go down to Africa, for instance, you'll see that there's the line that separates what we call North Africa and Sub-Saharan. But it's a very blurry situation here around that line. Can anybody tell me what is here that would be a good way to block this from this? What's here? A physical feature. The Saharan Desert, yes. The Saharan Desert is as large as the 48 states of the United States. Now, I know you're looking at Africa going, you've got to be kidding me. That map doesn't look that's that big. Well, it just shows you Africa's not properly sized. It's the same size as the 48 states. If you took the United States, you could plug it in right here. All right? Gives you an idea of how big Africa is. That desert separates North Africa from, down here it's raining and jungle, green as heck. You can't grow anything because it's so wet. And then north of that, it's so dry that at night it can be below 0 in temperature, or during the day it could be 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's sandy, and you have people, nomads, crossing it, and you have an oasis every once in a while where you'll see a palm tree and a little puddle of water. That's that environment. At one time, the Sahara Desert was not a desert. At one time, due to climate change, which had nothing to do with SUVs, at one time the Sahara Desert was fruitful and green and water. Why do we know that? Because if you dig down in the Sahara, you find it. It's still there. And you also find elements of great civilizations that died out because the weather changed. Again, not had anything to do with SUVs. The weather changed because Mother Nature changes, and that's just the way it works. So this idea of transition zone is very important. So even though you see these lines like here, East Asia, and you see that line, and you're seeing Southeast Asia, you're going, what is the real difference? Well, it's kind of it's a very relative difference, but there is a difference between Vietnamese and Chinese in a lot of ways. And our geographer has simply decided to define it like that. When we're working with maps, we deal with the concept of scale. So here we have a typical what we call Mercator projection on the top left. There's a world map, all right? Then we change the scale, and now we can go to a hemisphere. This is the Western Hemisphere, and it includes how many realms? 3 realms. And you can see on this map, it's almost like a close-up, like we've done with Google Earth. And then if we want to go in to North America and see what the regions look like, here is what we have, a regional map. And our geographer has decided to carve up North America with the northern frontier, which is primarily Canada, but you notice the continental interior, the western frontier, the Pacific, Southwest, the South, the core, the maritime, east, so on and so forth, and the French Canadian. And those different regions are very distinctive in a lot of different ways. So what is the definition of a region? An area of the Earth's surface marked by certain properties. So if I talk to you about the continental interior region, what is distinctive? What are the properties of this region, would you say? What are some properties, geographic properties, of this part of the country? What are some terms that you could use to define it? In terms of climate, this kind of light gold area. General climate, it's considered the continental climate. What does that mean? You can have extreme hot and you can have extreme cold. How about precipitation? In the western part, it's relatively dry. In most cases, this has been a desert for most of the existence of the 48 states in modern American times. Nebraska primarily is a desert, with the exception of the area along the Missouri River in the east. It's humid in Omaha, isn't it? Go out to North Platte in the summer and tell me if it feels different. Significantly different. Now, you'll notice you go out in western Nebraska and you'll see it's green and it's growing. How can that be? Well, that's due to humans and technology. And we had water underneath Nebraska. If you bring that up and spray it around, you can grow. And so we've been able to take a desert and make it a blooming Eden. And so people can live in Alliance and actually survive. Anybody here from Alliance? Sydney? Alliance. All right. And so it's very unique. And you go up in the northwest corners of Nebraska and the Sandhills, and you think you're on the moon. Interesting. I remember driving from, let's say, North Platte north to go to Ainsworth once, and I'd never been to Ainsworth before. And so I was listening to AM radio, big mistake. And so as I was driving north, all of a sudden the AM stations go nothing. And when you hit the button, it just spins to look for a station. It's just spinning. No AM stations up there. And then all of a sudden, I was getting South Dakota, and I was getting the Indian Reservation, South Dakota, and I was hearing someone singing in Sioux. I'm going, whoa, hold it. I'm not in South Dakota. Well, Ainsworth is close to the Dakotas. And so when I went to Valentine, I had the same issue. And I'm going, wow, I didn't realize how far that is. That's about a 4-hour drive. And I go up to that part of the country almost once a year. So I've learned to use my FM, and my Sirius Radio XM works really well, unless I want to listen to Native American tunes. Okay, so that's an example of regions. And obviously the criteria in a region can be human or cultural properties, like pivots. That's a human cultural thing. Physical characteristics like the sandhills, or both. And Nebraska is very distinctive, but Nebraska and Kansas are very similar in the fact that they're relatively dry, especially in the west, and they're relatively moist and humid in the east, right? And western Kansas, in some cases, looks like western, or at least southwestern Nebraska. And then I'm from Oklahoma. I'm from Enid, Oklahoma, and Enid's in northwest Oklahoma. So when I go to Enid, it reminds me of western Nebraska. It's relatively dry. However, Enid has built a lot of reservoirs, and as a result, the moisture level of Enid's gone up, and now it's humid in the summertime. But it wasn't that way when I was growing up. It's something that's relatively happened. And of course, now in Enid, instead of trees, we have oil wells. So I walk around, and instead of an oak tree, there's an oil well or a gas well or whatever. And that's what made Enid successful. Why? There's a railroad that runs through Enid, running north and south and east and west. And Enid's located upon a very historic cattle trail called the Chisholm Trail, which happens to also run through Kansas. And eventually that cattle trail went into Nebraska, right? And so that cattle trail became Highway 81, or that cattle trail eventually became I-35. So see how cultural things affect geography. Again, regions are smaller and more detailed than realms. So here is a bigger map showing you the regions of the realm. So for instance, if you have the South American realm to do your presentation, then I'm going to want you to talk about the regions of the realm so we can distinguish the different parts of South America. For instance, what's distinctively different about Brazil as opposed to Peru?
It's larger.
Huh?
It's larger.
It's larger. Good. What else?
Did you say Brazil and Peru?
Brazil and Peru. What's another difference other than Brazil's larger than Peru?
Brazilians speak Portuguese.
Aha, Brazilians speak Portuguese. It's the only Portuguese-speaking country in South America. Do you know why? Interestingly enough, I was at the band trip, Ellen, I was at the band trip. We took some of the kids skiing to Loveland Basin, and so I went into the restaurant area and found my little table, and I was watching the kids ski, and they had a beautiful mountain shot. It was like spring skiing in Colorado. Unbelievable, like 40 degrees. And they were skiing, having a great time. And as I was sitting at this table, it became quite obvious that I was taking a table that were 4 chairs, so everyone needed my chair. And eventually they needed a place to sit for lunch. And I had all these people that I didn't know come up and say, can I sit here? I said, sure. My last guy to sit at my table was a young guy from New York. And I introduced myself, and he said, hi, my name's Pablo. Okay, I think I know where this is going. Pablo, okay. And I said, where are you from? And he said, well, I'm in New York, and I just decided to come skiing. I said, okay, you're in New York? You mean you hopped on a plane, flew to Denver, and then came out to Loveland Basin to go skiing for a weekend? Yes. Cool. What do you do? I'm a lawyer. All right, makes sense. And he goes, but I'm not originally from New York. Well, I could figure that out, Pablo, because you still have an accent. And he goes, you are, let me guess. And I said, say something. And he said something. I said, you're from Brazil, aren't you? He goes, yes. How did you guess? I said, I recognize your Portuguese accent. Oh, you know about Brazil? It's amazing when you, because they're really impressed. Oh, Americans don't know geography. Didn't you see the J-Lo? Okay. Yeah. And I said, yeah, I know. And he goes, where are you from? Sao Paulo. Oh, cool. I said, do you play soccer? Oh, yeah, big soccer fan. I mean, so we had this nice conversation about, I said, do you want to live in New York forever? Oh, no. Where do you want to go? I want to go back to Brazil. That's my home. I said, what do you think of the United States? I love it. I went to school at Columbia. I got my law degree, doing very well. But I want to go back to Sao Paulo and be an attorney. I said, do you have a girlfriend? Yes. And she lives in Brazil. And so anyway, I thought that was cool. And the fact that we had that little conversation and the fact that I knew enough about Brazil to understand why he's doing things. I remember as a public school teacher in geography once, a little boy walked into my classroom, a new student, very shy, and I asked him where he was from, and he said, Brazil. And I said, good. And then one of the students in the geography class looked at him and said, do you speak Spanish? And he looked at the guy and said, well, no, I speak Portuguese. And of course, my high school students didn't know that at the time. And then I said, well, Simon, his name was Simon, I said, how would you define Spanish? And he looked at me and he said, bad Portuguese. Culture, huh? I wonder what Simon's doing now. All right, the next thing we're going to look at that I'm going to introduce before we get into our study of the realms is we're going to look at some physical aspects of the planet. And for those science people in here, or environmental studies, you may find this really fitting with what you're doing. We're going to look at landforms. We're going to talk about how planet Earth has evolved over time. The big debate for years for historians is how old is the United States, or the world for that matter, the planet Earth. And right now we're estimating about 4.5 billion years old. There have been people over time that have written and guessed all kinds of years. There's a Bishop Usher, which we'll learn about in the video that we're going to watch, that suggested that, the planet's only like 50,000 years old. Of course, modern geologists are saying that's ridiculous. And so there's the difference between religion and science, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But as we study the Earth, we're going to realize that the Earth has not always looked like the way it is now. And one of the interesting things about science, and I don't know, I sometimes I forget when I'm telling you and when I tell my Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so I apologize if I repeat myself. I'm not senile yet, but you may think so when I repeat things. Interesting thing about the concept of continental drift. Continental drift is a scientific theory. Have you heard of it? The continental drift theory? Okay. Do you know the guy that created the continental drift theory was not a geologist? He was a meteorologist. Yeah. And he was up exploring the North Pole, and he had this idea, it's kind of weird. It looks like South America and Africa at one time were part of a landmass. And so he started thinking these things and started researching it. And from his work, his name was Alfred Wegener, he created the so-called continental drift theory. Then the next question he said, okay, if they were at one time together, how did they break apart? And that led to another theory called, do I have it on there? Well, it's plate tectonics. So you see this, tectonic plates. The idea is that the Earth has two layers of rock. You have a rock that makes up the planet, and on top of it you have rock. And the rock on top is lighter, it's granite. And it floats around and moves around and bumps into each other. And when they collide, it does this, or this, or this, or this. And it creates all the landforms that we see. So most of the mountains in the world are created by when two plates collide or bump into one another. All right, go to the Alps, go to the Andes, you see they're real tall. You can go to Europe and you'll actually see mountains in which one plate is sticking over another. We'll see this in a video. Many of you are saying, oh, you mean the Rocky Mountains are an example of plate tectonics? Well, yes and no. The Rocky Mountains are on one plate, the Pacific Ocean is on the other plate, and those plates are doing this and buckling, and the buckling is raising up Colorado, Utah, and it's pushing it up, and so the Colorado River is nothing more than a river cutting down as it's being pushed up. So if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, and you're looking down and you go, wow, look at that, and you see the Colorado River, and a lot of people say, boy, the Colorado River must be big and violent to cut through those rocks. No, it's not the river going down, it's the rock coming up, and that's due to that buckling. So when you're flying over California, look out the window, past Nebraska, Colorado, see the Rockies? Okay, those are part of the buckling. Further west, it's kind of these kind of plateaus and all this in the Grand Canyon area. There's an uplift of the western part of the United States. that you're seeing as a result of that activity. This is an example of the plate lines. These are volcanoes and earthquakes, so they kind of outline the plates. This is going on all the time. Right now, there are earthquakes and volcanoes happening across the planet. I can go to a site and I can show you every second where something is going on, where we're seeing. I bet you my daughter in LA right now, they're probably having a little earthquake. And every once in a while, I remember when she first moved out there, she'd call me and say, Dad, my room is shaking and my books fell off my bookcase. And I said, Mackenzie, there's an earthquake. And I said, where are you in LA? Well, we're just south of an area called San Andreas. Oh my gosh, you're just south of the San Andreas Fault, where that's a crack in the earth, and that's where the earthquakes are. So now she's used to it. And when I went out there to see her this summer, there was a little tremor, and we were standing there, all of a sudden we're doing this. And that's normal. There are earthquakes in Nebraska, earthquakes in Kansas. In Enid, they registered an earthquake, and I went home to see my mother. She's 89, and there's now a crack in our living room wall. It's a direct result of some earthquake seismic activity going on in Oklahoma. There are no faults, major faults in Oklahoma. So it has to do with a movement over here, and it's just pushing its way through the state. We don't know why that's happening, by the way. Some people are saying it's due to fracking, which we'll talk about, but we can't prove that yet. Anyway, so this is important to show you plates and the ring of fire is what you call this. I guess if you want to be safe, don't live anywhere near one of those red dots. And notice where everyone's living, near the red dots, because it's a nice place to live, good weather, good agriculture. But the chances are one of these days there could be a massive volcano and earthquake and everything that you built will come falling down. How about Pompeii? How about Atlantis? How about all the stuff that you've read about in history? I mean, it's going to happen again, folks. Yosemite National Park, Yellowstone. How many people in Yellowstone National Park? Okay. What's in Yellowstone National Park? There's a volcano underneath that. It's going underneath like this. If that volcano comes back up and does what it did billions of years ago, and it blows up, Nebraska will be gone. We'll be under ash, and don't have to worry about it. Don't plan on it. You can't do anything about it. One day, all of a sudden, the sky's going to get black. It's going to rain ash, and we're done. Toast. There'll be some kind of pyroclastic, massive heat, and one of these days, North America is going to change. And that will probably be sometime after the Super Bowl.
Where the next ash falls.
Or what?
Where the next ash fall. Okay.
The next ash fall, yeah. And so one of these days, someone's going to be digging through Crete and find Doane College, and they're going to come to this room, and here we are, and they're going to say, oh, it looks like some geography class. They're still frozen in that position. Another thing we're going to talk about geography is climate. And as I've already told you, this is a big thing in geography today. There are all kinds of theories on why climate changes. Some people say one theory is better than another, but we'll talk about that and all the different theories. And obviously, when you look at this climate map, this kind of tells you where all the best places to live are. If you understand what climate is, then if you recognize what are the weather elements of climate, you can pretty well guess where most people in the world live. They live where the climate's good, where the weather's decent. And that's the best place for agriculture, fresh water, and natural resources are able to be used and produced. So we'll talk more about that. We'll look at the water cycle, precipitation, and so on. Here's another. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you on a map quiz to identify the climate areas by the A, B, C, D, and all. Look at the map there. I mean, that could be definitely not a soft science when I do that. And there's our discussion of climate change. We will do some more of. And so we got a lot to do. So next week, we'll finish. I'll try to get our schedule for the class done. I'm going to continue talking about some particular elements of physical geography on Tuesday. And we may start the video that I want to show you how the Earth was made, which is a wonderful film that shows you a lot of neat video and talks about the planet Earth. So we'll look at that. Okay? Have a nice weekend.